At my daughter's wedding, her fiancé tore the chair from under me, my war-torn body crashing to the floor, shrapnel scars ripping open with agony. As guests laughed, he snarled, "Stay in the dirt, old man. Heroes like you are nothing here." If this enrages you, smash that like button and tell us. What would you do? The Texas sun dipped low over Abilene, casting long shadows across Tom Hayes' modest wooden porch, where faded American flags hung beside a Marine Corps emblem. At 60, Tom, a retired gunnery sergeant, bore the scars of Afghanistan beneath his flannel shirt, his calloused hands stained with grease from the auto shop he ran on Main Street. Inside his small ranch-style home, walls displayed a humble shrine, a purple heart in a simple frame, photos of his late wife Emily, and snapshots of his daughter Sarah, now 28, grinning from childhood to college graduation. The air smelled of cedar and motor oil, a mix as familiar to Tom as the weight of his service dog tags, still tucked beneath his collar. Tom was wrenching a stubborn bolt on a 2072 Chevy pickup when his phone buzzed. Sarah's face lit up the screen, her voice bursting with excitement. "Dad, it's happening. Ethan proposed." Her words tumbled over the video call, her diamond ring catching the light a rock bigger than anything Tom could have afforded on his mechanic's pay. "We're getting married in June, at the Abilene VFW Hall. You'll love him, Dad, I promise." Tom forced a smile, but unease gnawed at him. That ring screamed Dallas money, not the small-town values Sarah grew up with. "Sounds like a big deal, sweetheart," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "When do I meet this Ethan?" Sarah laughed nervously. "Soon, Dad. He's different, but in a good way." Her voice faltered, and Tom's grip tightened on the wrench. He glanced at Emily's photo on the workbench, her eyes seeming to whisper, "Protect our girl." Something about Sarah's tone, the rush of this engagement, set off alarms forged in years of battlefield instinct. "I can't wait," Tom said, his voice steady but his heart racing. Whatever Ethan Caldwell was bringing to his daughter's life, Tom would face it head-on, semper fi. The late April breeze carried the scent of mesquite and motor oil through Abilene's dusty streets as Tom Hayes locked up his auto shop, the neon sign flickering off behind him. His boots crunched on the gravel lot, each step heavy with the unease that had settled in his chest since Sarah's call about her engagement. At 60, Tom had seen enough to trust his gut, honed by years in the Marines, where a split-second hunch could mean life or death. Ethan Caldwell, Sarah's fiancé, was coming to town tonight, and Tom was determined to size him up. He adjusted the dog tags beneath his faded flannel, their familiar weight grounding him as he headed to the VFW bar on Cedar Street, where Sarah had insisted they meet. Inside, the bar hummed with the low chatter of fellow veterans, their laughter mixing with the clink of beer bottles and the twang of a George Strait song on the jukebox. American flags and old service photos lined the wood-paneled walls, a testament to the brotherhood Tom cherished. He nodded to a few familiar faces, guys who'd served in Desert Storm, others from Iraq, before spotting Sarah at a corner booth, her smile bright but nervous. Beside her sat Ethan, his tailored blazer and polished loafers screaming Dallas wealth, out of place among the bar's worn stools and scuffed tables. His Rolex glinted as he scrolled through his phone, barely acknowledging the room. "Dad!" Sarah stood, hugging Tom tightly, her perfume a fleeting reminder of her childhood. "This is Ethan." Tom extended a calloused hand, but Ethan's handshake was limp, his eyes flicking over Tom's grease, stained jeans with a faint smirk. "Mr. Hayes," Ethan said, his tone smooth but edged with condescension. "Sarah said you're a mechanic. Quaint line of work." Tom's jaw tightened, but he forced a nod. "Fixing things keeps me honest," he replied, settling into the booth. Ethan leaned back, swirling his whiskey like he owned the place. Honest, sure. But in my world, it's about working smart, not just hard. I manage portfolios for high net worth clients in Dallas. Different stakes, different game. His smile didn't reach his eyes, and Sarah shifted uncomfortably, her engagement ring catching the dim light. "Ethan's got big plans for us," she said, her voice overly bright. "A condo in Dallas, maybe a summer place in Austin." Tom raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like a lot for a girl who loves her Abilene roots." Ethan chuckled, a sound sharp as broken glass. "Roots are nice, but progress is better. Sarah deserves more than this small-town charm." The words landed like a punch, but Tom kept his cool years of discipline holding his temper in check. Later that week, Ethan insisted on taking them to a steakhouse in Dallas, a sleek place with chandeliers and waiters in crisp white shirts. Tom felt every eye on his old Navy blazer, the one he'd worn to Sarah's college graduation, its seams strained against his broad shoulders. Ethan ordered a $200 bottle of Cabernet and a tomahawk steak, then slid the check toward Tom with a grin. "Figured you'd want to treat us, Tom. Show your support for our future." The bill was $420, enough to cover a month's groceries. Tom's hands shook as he pulled out his credit card, praying it wouldn't decline. Sarah's eyes widened. "Ethan, we can split it." But he waved her off. "Your dad's got this, babe. Right, Tom?" The smugness in his voice burned hotter than the Texas sun. Back home, Tom sat at his kitchen table, the glow of his old laptop casting shadows across Emily's photo. He pulled up Ethan's Facebook, each post a knife to the gut, pictures of sports cars, penthouse views, captions dripping with arrogance. Why settle for ordinary when you can have extraordinary? One post, from a week ago, made Tom's blood run cold. "Marrying up means leaving the past behind. Sarah's learning that." A comment below, from one of Ethan's friends, read, "Her dad's just a grease monkey, right? No problem there." Tom's fists clenched, the scars on his knuckles whitening. He'd promised Emily he'd protect Sarah, but how could he shield her from a man who saw her as a trophy, her family as baggage? As the screen dimmed, Tom's gaze fell on the purple heart hanging above the table, its ribbon faded but unyielding. Ethan's world of money and status was a far cry from the dusty fields of Afghanistan, where Tom had carried wounded brothers through hellfire. But this fight felt just as real, and Sarah was caught in the crosshairs. Tomorrow, he'd confront Ethan again, this time at a veterans fundraiser. If that boy thought he could bury a Marine's pride, he was about to learn what Semper Fi really meant. The Abilene VFW hall glowed under strings of warm yellow lights, filled with the hum of veterans swapping stories over cold beers. Tom Hayes stood near the bar, his broad shoulders squared in his faded Marine Corps jacket, the Purple Heart pinned to his chest catching the light. Tonight was the annual fundraiser for wounded veterans, a night where Abilene's tight-knit community honored their own. At 60, Tom felt the weight of every scar earned in Afghanistan, but the camaraderie of his brothers in arms kept him grounded. He scanned the room, nodding to old comrades, their faces etched with the same hard-won resilience. Sarah had promised to bring Ethan Caldwell, her fiancé, to this event, and Tom braced himself, the sting of Ethan's condescension from their last meeting still burning like shrapnel in his gut. Sarah arrived, her smile strained, clutching Ethan's arm. Ethan's polished loafers clicked against the hardwood floor, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the denim and flannel around him. He surveyed the hall with a curled lip, as if the scent of barbecue and Budweiser offended him. "This is rustic," he muttered to Sarah, loud enough for Tom to hear. Tom clenched his jaw, but before he could respond, the MC, A grizzled Vietnam vet named Pete called him to the stage. Gunnery Sergeant Tom Hayes, folks, a Marine who carried 3 men to safety under fire in Kandahar. Let's give him a hand. The room erupted in applause, veterans raising their glasses with shouts of "Semper Fi!" Tom stepped up, his voice steady as he spoke about the fundraiser's mission. "This is about our brothers and sisters who came home broken but never beaten," he said, his eyes scanning the crowd. "We lift each other up. That's what Marines do." The room cheered, but Ethan's voice cut through like a blade. "Nice speech, Tom," he called out, standing with a mocking grin. "But let's be real, heroes are yesterday's news. This world runs on money now, not medals." The hall fell silent, veterans exchanging stunned glances. Tom's hands balled into fists, his scars tingling as if the wounds were fresh. "You got something to say, son?" he asked, voice low but lethal. Ethan sauntered closer, his confidence fueled by the crowd's shock. "I'm just saying, old man, your time's up. These war stories don't pay for Sarah's future. She needs a man who can deliver, not some grease monkey clinging to glory days." Gasps rippled through the room. Pete started forward, but Tom raised a hand, holding his ground. Sarah's face paled. "Ethan, stop it," she whispered, tugging his arm, but he shook her off. "No, babe. Your dad needs to hear this. He's holding you back with this small-town hero nonsense." Oh. That night, Tom sat alone in his darkened living room, the hum of Abilene's quiet streets barely audible through the windows. His purple heart lay heavy in his palm, its edges worn from years of silent reflection. Memories of Kandahar flooded back, gunfire tearing through the night, the screams of his squad as an IED ripped their Humvee apart. Tom had dragged his wounded brothers 200 yards through a hail of bullets, his own leg shredded by shrapnel, only to lose one to a sniper's shot. The guilt still clawed at him, sharper than any wound. Now, Ethan's words echoed in his head. Heroes are yesterday's news. His chest tightened, a single tear tracing the lines of his weathered face. Had he failed Sarah too, by clinging to a past that no one valued? Unbeknownst to Tom, Sarah had overheard Ethan on his phone later that night, his voice cold as he bragged to a friend. "Her dad's a nobody, just a washed-up vet. Once we're married, I'll cut him out of her life." Sarah's heart sank, her trust in Ethan fracturing like glass. She slipped away, driving through the Texas night, her engagement ring feeling heavier with every mile. Tomorrow was her wedding, and Tom would face Ethan again, this time in front of everyone they knew. But tonight, in the silence of his home, Tom wondered if he'd already lost the fight to protect his little girl. June sunlight streamed through the pecan trees outside the Abilene VFW hall, casting dappled shadows across rows of white chairs set up for Sarah Hayes' wedding. The air buzzed with the soft hum of conversation, the clink of champagne flutes, and the twang of a country band warming up in the corner. Tom Hayes, 60 and weathered, stood at the edge of the reception area, tugging at the collar of his navy blazer, the same one he'd worn to Sarah's college graduation 5 years ago. Its faded fabric felt out of place among the sea of tailored suits and glittering dresses, a reminder of the gap between his world and Ethan Caldwell's. His dog tags, tucked beneath his shirt, pressed against his chest, grounding him as he watched Sarah glide through the crowd in her mother Emily's altered wedding gown, her smile radiant but tinged with tension. Tom had walked Sarah down the aisle an hour ago, his heart swelling with pride despite the knot of dread in his gut. Ethan's cruel words at the veterans' fundraiser still echoed, "Heroes are yesterday's news," and the sting of that public humiliation lingered like shrapnel under his skin. Now, as guests mingled, Tom scanned the room, noting Ethan's polished friends from Dallas, their Rolexes flashing as they laughed over stories of stock portfolios and lake houses. He was assigned to table 8, far from the head table, wedged between Sarah's great-uncle Joe and a couple he barely knew. The message was clear: family, but barely. As the dinner service began, Tom approached his seat, his boots heavy on the polished hardwood floor. Ethan materialized behind him, his smile sharp as a bayonet. "Tom, enjoying the big day?" he asked, his voice dripping with false warmth. Tom nodded, wary. "It's Sarah's day, that's what matters." Ethan's eyes gleamed with malice. "Of course. Just don't trip over all this elegance. Wouldn't want you to feel out of place." Before Tom could respond, he lowered himself toward the chair, one hand on the armrest for balance. In a swift, deliberate motion, Ethan yanked the chair back, sending Tom crashing to the floor. Pain shot through his bad knee, the one torn by shrapnel in Kandahar, and his blazer ripped at the shoulder. The crowd's laughter erupted, a cruel chorus that drowned out the band's soft strumming. "Guess some heroes belong in the dirt, huh?" Ethan's voice rang out, loud enough for every guest to hear. "Stay down, old man." Gasps mixed with chuckles from Ethan's Dallas friends, while Sarah's cry cut through the noise. "Dad!" She rushed toward him, her gown trailing, her face pale with horror. Uncle Joe half rose, his arthritic hands trembling with outrage. Tom lay there for a heartbeat, the weight of his 60 years and a lifetime of service pressing him into the floor. His scars burned, not just from the fall, but from the betrayal of a man who'd claimed his daughter's heart. Then, a voice boomed across the hall, sharp with military precision. "Gunnery Sergeant Hayes? Is that you?" All eyes turned to the entrance, where a tall figure in a crisp suit strode forward, his silver hair and ramrod posture marking him as a man who'd commanded respect in battle. Dar Ta Robert Bob Larson, Tom's old commanding officer from Afghanistan, had arrived late, his flight delayed from Virginia. His eyes locked on Tom, recognition dawning with a mix of awe and disbelief. "Folks, hold up." Bob's voice carried the weight of a drill sergeant, silencing the room. "This man, this Marine, saved my life and 3 others in Kandahar, dragging us 200 yards through enemy fire with shrapnel in his leg. He's a damn hero, awarded the Purple Heart for valor." The crowd froze, champagne glasses forgotten, as Bob's words sank in. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, her hand clutching Tom's arm as he struggled to his feet, his face a mask of quiet dignity. Ethan's smirk vanished, his face paling to the color of desert sand. Whispers rippled through the guest's war hero, Purple Heart. Kandahar recasting Tom from a small-town mechanic to a titan of courage. Bob stepped closer, his hand on Tom's shoulder, his voice thick with emotion. "If I just saw someone disrespect this man, they've got no business standing in his shadow." Sarah looked from Bob to Ethan, her expression shifting from shock to betrayal. Tom met Bob's gaze, a silent nod passing between them, forged in the fires of war. But his eyes drifted to Sarah, who stood trembling, her engagement ring glinting like a chain. The pain of Ethan's cruelty wasn't just in the fall, it was in the fracture it had caused in his daughter's heart. As the band struck up a slow tune, Tom knew this wasn't the end. Ethan's pride wouldn't let this go quietly. Tonight, in the quiet of Abilene's starry night, Tom would face him again, and this time it would be man to man. The Texas night wrapped Abilene in a blanket of stars, the only sound the distant hum of cicadas and the occasional pickup truck rumbling down Main Street. Tom Hayes sat on his front porch, the wooden boards creaking under his weight, his Marine Corps jacket draped over his shoulders. The torn sleeve from his fall at Sarah's wedding still hung loose, a badge of the day's humiliation. At 60, Tom's scars from Afghanistan, both the ones etched in his skin and those buried deeper, felt raw, reopened by Ethan Caldwell's cruel words. Heroes belong in the dirt. The VFW Hall's applause for his valor, sparked by Darta Bob Larson's revelation, had faded, replaced by a gnawing dread. Sarah's tear-streaked face as she helped him up haunted him, her trust in Ethan cracking like brittle glass. Headlights sliced through the darkness, followed by the roar of an engine, a sleek BMW that screamed Dallas money. Ethan stormed up the walkway, his polished loafers kicking up gravel, his face twisted with fury. He didn't knock. He pounded on the screen door, the sound echoing like gunfire in Tom's ears. "Open the damn door, Hayes!" Ethan's voice was a snarl, stripped of the polished charm he'd worn at the wedding. Tom rose slowly, his bad knee throbbing, and opened the door, standing tall despite the ache. "What do you want, son?" he asked, his tone calm but edged with steel forged in battle. Ethan pushed past him into the living room, his eyes sweeping over the modest furniture, the faded photos of Sarah's childhood, and the purple heart framed above the fireplace. "You've poisoned her against me," he spat, jabbing a finger at Tom. "Sarah's pulling away, asking questions, doubting me, all because of you and your sob story hero act." Tom's hands stayed steady at his sides, but his heart raced, the same way it had in Kandahar under enemy fire. "I didn't tell her anything she didn't already see," he said evenly. "You showed her who you are when you yanked that chair and laughed." Ethan's face reddened, his fists clenching. "You think you're some big shot because you got a medal 20 years ago. I'm her future, old man. I can give her everything you never could, a penthouse, a life beyond this dusty dump." He gestured wildly at the room, knocking a photo of Sarah and her mother Emily off the mantel. The frame hit the floor, glass shattering. Tom's breath caught, but he didn't flinch. "Pick that up," he said, his voice low. "Dangerous." Ethan laughed, a brittle sound. "Or what? You'll drag me through the desert like one of your war buddies. Wake up, Tom. You're nothing now. I'll make sure Sarah cuts you out for good." The threat landed like a mortar round, but Tom stood his ground, his eyes locked on Ethan's. "You don't scare me, boy," he said, stepping closer, his voice steady as a Marine calling out orders. "I fought for my brothers, not for glory. I carried men through hell to keep them alive. You think you can break me with words? I've faced worse than you." Ethan faltered, his bravado flickering. For a moment, the room was silent, the air thick with the weight of Tom's words, each one carrying the strength of a man who'd stared death in the face and walked away. Unseen in the hallway, Sarah stood frozen, her car keys still in hand. She'd driven over after the wedding, unable to shake the image of her father on the floor, Ethan's cruel laughter ringing in her ears. She'd heard everything: Ethan's threat to cut Tom out, his dismissal of her father's sacrifices. Her engagement ring felt like a shackle now, its diamond cold against her skin. "Ethan," she said, stepping into the light, her voice trembling but resolute, "you don't get to talk to my dad like that. You don't get to decide who's in my life." Ethan spun, his face paling. "Sarah, I was just—" "No," she cut him off, her eyes blazing with the fire Tom had raised her with. "I thought you loved me, but you don't even know what love is. It's not about penthouses or power. It's about respect, and you've got none for the man who gave me everything." She slipped the ring off her finger, setting it on the table with a soft clink. "We're done." Ethan's mouth opened, but no words came. Tom watched, his heart breaking for his daughter but swelling with pride at her strength. As Ethan stumbled out, his BMW roaring into the night, Tom pulled Sarah into his arms, her sobs muffled against his chest. The fight wasn't over. Ethan's pride wouldn't let him walk away quietly, and Sarah's heart was still raw. Tomorrow, at the VFW Hall, they'd face the fallout together, and Tom knew Ethan would have one last chance to prove whether he could change or lose Sarah forever. The Abilene VFW hall was still alive with the soft glow of string lights, the wedding reception now a muted hum of conversation and clinking glasses under the Texas stars. Tom Hayes stood near the bar, his torn navy blazer a silent testament to the humiliation he'd endured hours earlier when Ethan Caldwell yanked his chair out, sending him sprawling to the floor. At 60, Tom's weathered hands, scarred from Afghanistan, gripped a glass of water tightly, his purple heart pinned to his chest, catching the light. Sarah stood beside him, her wedding gown slightly crumpled, her eyes red from crying after confronting Ethan at Tom's house. The sting of Ethan's threat, "I'll make sure Sarah cuts you out for good," still hung heavy, but Sarah's decision to end the engagement had lit a spark of hope in Tom's heart. Yet the air felt charged, like the calm before a desert storm. The band paused, and a hush fell over the crowd as Ethan stepped back into the hall, his polished loafers clicking against the hardwood. His face was pale, his usual swagger replaced by a nervous tremor in his hands. He approached the microphone stand, left unattended by the band, and cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the sudden silence. "I need everyone's attention," he said, his voice cracking like dry timber. Guests turned, some with raised eyebrows, others with frowns, still reeling from the earlier scene when Darta Bob Larson had revealed Tom's heroism in Kandahar. Sarah tensed, her hand finding Tom's arm, her breath catching. Ethan's eyes darted to Tom, then to the crowd, his knuckles white around the microphone. "What I did today was unforgivable," he began, his voice raw. "I mocked a man who risked his life for others, a Marine who carried his brothers through gunfire. I pulled his chair out, laughed as he fell, and told him he belonged in the dirt. I did it because I was afraid I'd never measure up to a man like Tom Hayes." Gasps rippled through the room, and Sarah's grip tightened on Tom's arm. Ethan's voice broke as he continued. "I've spent months treating Tom like he was beneath me, a small-town mechanic who didn't belong in my world. I was wrong. I was cruel. And I'm standing here to say I'm sorry." The hall was silent, the weight of Ethan's words sinking in. Tom stood still, his face unreadable, but his heart pounded with the same intensity he'd felt under fire. Ethan turned to him, stepping away from the microphone, his eyes glistening. "Mr. Hayes Gunnery, Sergeant Hayes, I disrespected a hero who saved lives, including my future father-in-law's commanding officer. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to earn it. I want to be the man Sarah deserves, not the coward who tried to tear you down." Sarah's breath hitched, tears spilling down her cheeks as she looked at her father, searching for his reaction. Tom stepped forward, his boots steady on the floor, his voice calm but resonant with the authority of a man who'd faced death and walked away. "Son," he said, his eyes locked on Ethan's, "it takes guts to stand up and own your mistakes in front of everyone. That's a start. Real men don't just apologize, they prove it with actions." He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Ethan took it, his grip trembling but sincere. The crowd erupted in soft applause, veterans nodding with approval, their respect for Tom deepening. Sarah wiped her eyes, a flicker of hope crossing her face. "Dad," she whispered, "do you think he means it?" "I think he's got a chance to prove it," Tom replied, his voice gentle but firm. "But it's up to you, Sarah. You decide what you deserve." Ethan nodded, his face etched with determination. "I'll show you both," he said quietly. "I'll start by joining the VFW's next fundraiser, working alongside your community. I want to understand what makes you and this town so strong." Sarah's lips trembled, but she didn't reach for the engagement ring she'd left behind. Instead, she squeezed Tom's hand, her strength mirroring the fire he'd raised her with. As the band resumed, playing a slow rendition of "Sweet Caroline," Tom felt Emily's presence in the warm Texas night, her memory guiding him as it always had. Ethan's apology was a step, but the road to redemption was long, and Sarah's heart hung in the balance. Tomorrow, at the Veterans Fundraiser, they'd see if Ethan could walk the talk, proving his worth not just to Sarah, but to the community that had shaped her. For now, Tom stood tall, a Marine unbroken, ready to face whatever came next with his daughter by his side. The late June sun dipped below the horizon, painting Abilene's sky in hues of amber and rose, as the annual Veterans Fundraiser kicked off at the town's Memorial Park. The air carried the scent of barbecue and fresh-cut grass, mingling with the soft twang of a country band playing God Bless the USA. Tom Hayes stood near a stone monument etched with the names of Abilene's fallen heroes, his 60-year-old frame steady in his Marine Corps jacket, the Purple Heart pinned proudly to his chest. The torn sleeve from Sarah's wedding, where Ethan Caldwell had humiliated him, was now mended, a quiet symbol of healing. Around him, veterans and their families gathered, their laughter and stories a testament to the unbreakable bonds of service. For Tom, this was home where honor wasn't just a word, but a way of life. Sarah stood nearby, her sundress fluttering in the warm Texas breeze, her eyes brighter than they'd been in weeks. Beside her, Ethan, no longer in his Dallas-tailored suits, wore a simple polo and jeans, his hands busy setting up tables for the fundraiser. Gone was the smug grin that had mocked Tom. In its place was a quiet determination, his shoulders hunched with the weight of proving himself. Since his public apology at the wedding, Ethan had thrown himself into Abilene's veteran community, volunteering at the VFW Hall and listening to stories of sacrifice from men like Tom. Tonight, he was here to help raise funds for wounded veterans, a small step toward earning the trust he'd nearly lost. Tom watched Ethan lift a cooler of ice, his movements awkward but earnest. "He's trying, Dad," Sarah said softly, stepping beside him, her voice a mix of hope and caution. "He's been at every VFW meeting this month, asking questions, learning. He even helped repaint the hall." Tom nodded, his weathered face softening. "Takes more than a few weeks to change a man, Sarah," he said, his voice low but warm. "But he's showing up. That's something." Sarah's lips curved into a small smile, her hand brushing the spot where her engagement ring used to sit. "I told him we're starting over. No ring, no promises, just actions." Tom squeezed her shoulder, pride swelling in his chest. "You're tougher than I ever was, kiddo." Across the park, Ethan approached, wiping sweat from his brow. "Mr. Hayes," he said, his voice steady but respectful. "I got the donation booth set up, raised $500 already." Tom met his gaze, searching for the arrogance that had once defined him. Instead, he saw a flicker of humility, raw and unpolished. "Good work, son," Tom replied, extending a hand. Ethan shook it firmly, a silent vow passing between them. The crowd around them buzzed, veterans clapping Ethan on the back, their acceptance a hard-earned badge. Darta Bob Larson, who'd revealed Tom's heroism at the wedding, stood nearby, nodding with approval. "Looks like the boy's learning what Semper Fi means," Bob said, his voice carrying the weight of a commander's pride. As the band struck up a slow tune, Tom walked to the monument, his fingers tracing the names of brothers lost in Kandahar. The memory of dragging wounded comrades 200 yards through gunfire flickered, but tonight it felt lighter, softened by the sight of Sarah and Ethan working side by side. Emily's presence lingered in the warm air, her love woven into every choice Tom had made to protect their daughter. Sarah joined him, her hand slipping into his, her eyes reflecting the monument's glow. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she whispered. "You never gave up on me, even when I almost lost myself." Tom's throat tightened, his voice rough. "I'd fight 1,000 wars for you, Sarah," the fundraiser continued, laughter and music filling the park, a community united by shared sacrifice and second chances. Ethan glanced at Tom and Sarah, his face softened by a resolve to be better. As the night deepened, Tom knew the road ahead wasn't finished. Ethan's redemption was a work in progress, and Sarah's heart was still healing. But here, under Abilene's starry sky, they were building something new, a family rooted in respect and love. Tomorrow, Tom would share the lessons this journey had taught him, lessons he hoped would inspire others to honor their own. The Abilene night settled into a quiet hush, the stars above Memorial Park twinkling like the memories of battles fought and won. Tom Hayes stood alone by the stone monument, his fingers brushing the names of fallen comrades etched in granite, their sacrifice as enduring as the Texas plain. At 60, Tom had faced war's fury and a fiancé's cruelty, yet he stood unbroken, his purple heart gleaming faintly under the moonlight. Sarah's wedding had tested him, Ethan Caldwell's humiliating chair pull, the sting of betrayal, and the weight of protecting his daughter, but it had also taught him lessons forged in fire. Now, as the fundraiser's laughter faded, Tom's thoughts turned to what this journey meant, not just for him, but for every veteran watching. First, honor isn't a medal pinned to your chest. It's how you lift others up, even when they try to drag you down. Tom stood tall when Ethan mocked him, showing that true strength lies in dignity, not vengeance. Second, forgiveness is a battlefield of its own. By giving Ethan a chance to change, Tom proved that letting go of anger doesn't mean weakness, it means trusting in redemption. Finally, the veteran community is family. From Bob Larson's salute to the VFW Hall's embrace, Abilene showed Tom that no hero stands alone. These lessons aren't just for veterans. They're for anyone who's ever fought for what's right. As the monument's shadow stretched across the grass, Tom felt Emily's love guiding him, a reminder that every struggle builds a stronger tomorrow. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe to GI Dad's Family Drama. Share your own story of honor or forgiveness below. We're here to listen, just as you've listened to ours.